All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on what part of the world you are joining us from. I am Alex Faust, your host of Conversations at the Edge, and it's very exciting to be here on a Monday. Typically, we do these Wednesday, Thursdays, but had to reschedule Mike's interview from a couple weeks ago. So very happy to start your week or start my week with Mike, and I hope you guys are as well. If this is your first time hearing Mike Michalowicz, let me give a little bit of an introduction. By his 35th birthday, he had founded and sold two multi-million-dollar companies, and confident that he had figured out the formula to success, he became an angel investor and proceeded to lose his entire fortune. So he started over again, driven to find better ways to grow healthy, strong companies. And today, he's one of the most prolific small business authors of our time, with critically acclaimed books, including Profit First, The Pumpkin Plan, Fix This Next, Get Different, and Clockwork, and the revised vision of Clockwork, which we're going to be discussing today. He leads two new multi-million-dollar ventures as he tests his latest business research for his books. He's a former small business columnist for the Wall Street Journal and business makeover specialist on MSNBC. And I'm very, very excited to welcome one of my favorite authors and thought leaders at Growth Institute. So, Mike, welcome to Conversations at the Edge. Welcome back to Conversations at the Edge. And where are you calling in from today?
It's a joy to be back with you. I'm calling in from New Jersey, northern New Jersey, where it's, let's see, now it's only 77 degrees. We just had the storm tear through, drops down from 95. So that was good.
I think it's headed my way to Philadelphia at this moment in time. We're expecting the storm this afternoon.
You're welcome. A gift from New Jersey.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we get going, I like the story actually about your tree, and someone from the audience says, love the tree. Do you want to share, the story behind the tree?
Yeah. So this came out of some experiments I was running. I wrote a book called Get Different. And when I was researching it, I was trying to find what the essence of successful marketing. And what it is doing differently than the established mode, what your competition's doing. And it ties into scientific reason. There's a thing called habituation and so forth. But basically, prospects become blind to a repeated message, regardless if it's your message or someone else's, particularly if it's the same message from multiple sources. So I was looking at my contemporaries, authors, and noticed that everyone has a bookshelf displaying their books. I want to display my books too, but I'm like, that's the common noise. And therefore, we can't even see it. It's invisible. So I said, what would work? So I started running tests and found this tree was the most appealing and the most different. And I appreciate Dave saying those kind words about the shelf. Interestingly, I've had every podcast that I'm on or every webinar I do, people are like, oh, check out that cool shelf. It's an intentional marketing trick that jogs our mind because it's different than expected. Maybe you lingered on the books a little bit longer than you would if you saw it in someone's generic background. So it's a result of a marketing experiment. And I would now call it the tree of knowledge, the knowledge I'm trying to contribute and gain. And the one thing you can't see, because it's kind of off the camera, but above there keeps going up. There's 25 spaces in total. My intent in my life's work is to complete 25 books. So I'm about 1/3 of the way there.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So today we're here to talk about your newest revised version of the book Clockwork. Can you give us some background, what the book's about? And we'll start from there.
Yeah, and I just got the galley copies in. So this is the galley of the book, the big orange band on it. And it was interesting. This book took me a year to write. And my publisher was kind of aghast. My publisher's Penguin. And my editor called and said, hey, we want to give you about 2 months to rewrite this book. I'm like, 2 months to do the revising span? He goes, yeah, everyone just polishes up the front and the end. I said, no, this is a full rewrite. I got to tear the whole book apart. The impetus behind this was I've had readers deploy Clockwork and struggle in certain areas. So I needed to simplify that. Plus, we have a service organization behind it called Run Like Clockwork. We have over 1,000 participants now. We just surpassed our 1,000 mark. And we found that, there were some things we could do better. And there were some things I should include now. So the new book is 60% new content from the ground up. And then 40%, which is basically the framework, has been restructured. So it's the same core framework, restructured in a new format. So it's easier to digest. And that's my hope, is that people can do Clockwork faster and easier. I'm also honored to say that Gino Wickman, the author of Traction, reached out to me. He's like, hey, I got to write the foreword for this. And he wrote the foreword to the book.
Awesome. So, for those who have not read the original version of Clockwork, what's the 30,000 foot view of the methodology?
So one of the core tenets is, well, actually, let me start off with this. And this is actually how I open the book, is the job of an entrepreneur is not to do the job, it's to create jobs. So here's the context. 14% of the world population will ever start or build a business. 14%. 20% of that 14% will actually be successful, do it on a sustained, profitable basis. That means 3% of the population builds a successful business. And it also means that 97% of the population is looking for a good job with a good company. And so our job is to create good companies that provide good jobs for people who want the work. So the first tenet I tell entrepreneurs is if you're doing work, you're stealing jobs. Our job is to create a company, have a vision, and organize people to help it make that vision a reality. The second thing is the ultimate acid test to prove that your business can run without you is this concept called the fourification. You and I were talking before we went live here. Ever since I wrote the original book 5 years ago, I've been doing this. One of the benefits of being an author is that you're actually held to the tenets you teach. So I've been taking a fourification every year. Last year I took 9 weeks. But what I discovered is almost every business, including the folks listening in right now, moves in monthly cycles, meaning you have to track clients or prospects, you have to serve them or deliver your product, you have to handle employee issues, you have a lot of administrative work behind it, you got financials, and you do that every single month. And at the end of the month, we close out the month and we start the next. What's this month's or quarter goals? We keep on repeating over and over. So my conclusion was, oh, wow, if an owner can be extracted from a business for 4 weeks, that will touch on 90% of what the business does. So theoretically, if we can be extracted for 4 weeks, we can be extracted into perpetuity. So one of the key approaches to designing a business that runs like clockwork, and you can do this right now, is to go in your calendar, the next year or two, book out a 4-week vacation. And if that concept gives you some agita, that's your subconscious telling you, oh, we don't have an efficient business here. That is a call to do it. And one last thing is, I want you to realize when you schedule this, some people are like, I don't want my employees to think I'm going to the beach drinking Coronas while they sweat for me. This is the ultimate form of empowerment. Our company's tiny. I have 10 employees here. Our other building, 15. I got 25 employees total. We're small. But here's what's something that's interesting. When I left, my employees came back to me and said, we've never felt so empowered. We were put in positions of leadership. We were able to do things and make the decisions. We had total control. That was exciting. Well, we subsequently implemented, our president decided to do this 2 years ago. Every single employee gets a 4-week vacation. And it's not about the benefit to them. That's part of it. But it's the benefit to the company. You see, when I'm not around, the company has to have other people cover for me. But when our president isn't around, or a graphic designer, or a social media specialist, Jeremy, our social media guy, when he's not around, he has to have backups in place. So now that he goes on these annual 4-week vacations for himself, he's built redundancy for him. And listen, everyone is going to have a 4-week vacation at some point, you included, ourselves included. The question is, do we deliberately do this? Is there a deliberate disruption to our business, our absence, or is it something that's thrust upon us because we're sick or someone needs us? Or an employee leaves. It's going to happen. So let's intentionally put disruption in place to build that muscle for the business.
I love that. That's awesome. Something that I definitely admire. And I guess it's time for me to take my 4-week
talk
vacation.
With Daniel Marcos there. I'll be able to chit chat with him.
Fantastic. So just a reminder for the folks who are here live, the last 10 minutes are for you. So if you have questions for Mike, you want to put them in the chat. We'll make sure to get to those towards the end of our conversation today. But Mike, it's my understanding that, the original Clockwork was meant for the entrepreneur. And now this new revised version is both for the entrepreneur and the employees. So what kind of changes were made there, and what makes this applicable for now employees and entrepreneurs alike?
I got a call a year after I wrote Clockwork, the original version, from an employer, an entrepreneur, who said, I love this book. I want to execute on it. But he's like, I don't know how to teach my team. I said, well, give them the book. And he said, I can't do that, because then they'll know that I'm trying to get a 4-week vacation. They'll know that it's about me designing the business to run itself. And I was like, oh my gosh, people aren't distributing this because it's not designed for the employee. So I rewrote it. There's actually in each chapter, there's a section specifically for employees. There's also a lens for the employee to see how the owner is what they're looking to do. I think the great misperception was, oh, if my business runs without me, I'm working off the sweat of other people, as I alluded to already. But the reality is it's an empowerment mechanism and people can start moving up quicker. I call it the superhero syndrome. Many entrepreneurs swoop in and fix the problem at hand, but they leave this massive wake of damage behind them. They disempower the police from enforcing things because they're the ones kind of saving the day as they destroy a city. Well, that's what we as entrepreneurs do. We swoop in to fix a problem and we throw our colleagues off. Our employees are all thrown off and then they got to clean up after us. So in this book, I talk about how the owner will be going through a transformation and their perception of themselves even has to change. So the employee gets a perspective that I don't think they would otherwise. Like I said, at the end of every single chapter, so there's 12 chapters, 12 sections for the employees on exactly what they can do to help elevate the business.
So one of the things in the original Clockwork, and I think it's probably in the revised version as well, is about this productivity myth. And that even when times are really great for the business, it doesn't necessarily lead to the more time, the more freedom to get away and take vacation. And I'm curious, why does this so often end up in a cycle of just busyness rather than real productivity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just saw someone said, hey, I didn't see the book. So there's the book. It's called Clockwork. It's on Amazon, whatever. It's at other bookstores. But the interesting thing in here, I interviewed a productivity expert because my thought was, okay, the need is for our businesses to run itself. Therefore, if we can be more productive, there's the answer. I met with one of the leading authorities in productivity. And I asked him, I said, how do we achieve this? And I remember almost like we were in some kind of speakeasy. He looked around and then he looked at me and said, productivity's crap. I was like, what? You're the productivity expert. He goes, no, there's a problem with it. What happens is productivity, we have a tranche of time. We had 8 hours in the day, for example, that we have to get all this work done. Productivity allows us to get that same volume of work done in less time. So now we're getting all that work done in 6 hours. The problem that presents itself is now we have a 2-hour free time. So what do? We take on more work. And with taking on more work, we have to become more productive to crunch it down again. And then we take on more work. We become impacted with work. And should there be one disruption to the day, everything goes out of control. That's the problem with productivity. Now, productivity is necessary. Whoever said, let's just stick with square wheels was an idiot. I mean, someone's like, oh, here's a better way to approach this. Let's do round wheels. But there's a certain point where constantly improving your own output has depreciating returns and maybe even negative returns because you're running at risk. Clockwork is about organizational efficiency. It's about organizing resources, people, technology. You can even organize your clients to do work in a fashion that is optimized. And one of the key elements I talk about here too is matching up, and maybe people want to write this one down. Don't match people's talents to their titles. Match their talents to the tasks. I'll give you an example. I need a receptionist. And that means someone that's really good at answering the phone, can do light data entry, can greet people coming in, whatever the elements are. And I try to find the perfect person match this. But it's hard to find someone that's great at data entry and great and charismatic for interfacing with people. So the better approach is more like a web-like structure and match up individual talent. Someone that's great at data entry may also be my sales guy. And ironically, this is what happened in our own company. We found our salesperson is a great closer, but not a great farmer or rapport builder. We took the person that was serving in the reception responsibility. He was very charismatic and said, hey, we also want you filling frontline sales. The salesperson, we said, you're really good at the technical details. We need you doing data entry. So we reorganized talents to tasks, built a much more like web-like structure as opposed to the traditional pyramid chart, the stronger, more nimble company.
I like that. Thank you. And I think it's a good transition to my next question. You have this acronym QBR that I think is at the forefront of a lot of what Clockwork is about. It stands for Queen Bee Role. So I'm curious if you can share, what is that And what was the transition from how it was being used in the original Clockwork to now how you're using it today?
Yeah, this is the most important concept of the book. It's the 4-week vacation test is massively important. And someone was saying, I think Emery's talking about how the impact is on other people. Like I shared in our company, everyone takes a 4-week vacation. I talk about the deployment of that and the results you may see by actually distributing workload by forced redundancy. Well, this QBR, in the original book, I talk about being the heart of the business. I learned it using a technique called biomimicry. I took what nature's figured out, how to build a beehive very quickly, very efficient organization, how to translate that to a business. Well, in a beehive, the most important function or role that happens is the production of eggs. Eggs keeps the beehive alive. Bees live for a very short period of time. The bee that supports that production is the queen bee. Now, the analogy breaks down a little bit here because what's most important is not the queen bee, but it's the role she's serving, producing eggs. If the queen bee is failing to produce eggs, the bees will spawn a new queen and get rid of the current one. In our business, there is a single most important role, the production of eggs. Like, what is it? And once you know it, we need to make sure it's always running along. And if the people or persons, the person or persons that are supposed to be doing it aren't doing it well, we need to see something and say something immediately. In the old book, I did it through deductive logic. I'd say, well, what are all the things you do in your business? And rewind by saying this is less important than that, and you find your most important thing. And it's inevitably the thing you stake your reputation on. Well, I had one reader reach out and say, I figured out my QBR. And I said, what is it? They said, it's invoicing. Nothing more important than invoicing. It has to go out on time. That's how we make our money. Invoicing is everything. I said, okay, do you really stake your reputation on that? He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let's call your customers and ask them, how important is invoicing? Is that the most important thing we do? And he's like, well, no, they care about something else. And that became my epiphany is instead of doing this deductive logic, we'll first start off by saying, what is the biggest commitment you make to your customers? I call it the big promise. For me, as an author, of all the things I do, the most important thing I do and tend to do is simplify entrepreneurship. FedEx, the most important thing they do is deliver packages on time. So that's the promise that they're making. Then we ask, of all the activities, what keeps the hive alive? What's the one activity that's most important to deliver on that? So for me, I do speaking, I do interviews, I write books, but of all those things, I better write great books that simplify entrepreneurship. So to me, the QBR is write great books. And what that means is, I call it in season. I'm in season now. I'm writing a new book about employee engagement, which is a complement to Clockwork. I write 4 hours a day. And so my team here knows if Mike's not writing 4 hours a day, we're in trouble. Because that's what we're staking our reputation on, is simplifying entrepreneurship through great books. FedEx, a much bigger company. They don't have 25 employees, they have like 25,000 probably in the department. I mean, they're huge. They don't have one person serving the QBR. They have multiple. And they promise to deliver packages on time. We ask, of all the activities, what's most important? They have print shops, they have a customer service department, but it's the logistics management that's most important. Imagine FedEx saying, you know what, we're going to cancel our logistics. We're going to put everyone into the customer service department. The headline in the newspaper next week will be every single package lost by FedEx, but they're super friendly about it. You know, a $50 billion company is on the verge of bankruptcy. They're going to go out of business overnight for failing to do the most important thing, the QBR. Now, here's the interesting thing. Flip it, and FedEx says, you know what, everyone in customer service, we're going to ditch that. We're going to go to logistics. We're going to double down. Now the headline says, FedEx not answering the phone, but every package delivered, nothing missed. FedEx may be compromised. They may be hurt because they're not answering the phone, but they won't go out of business. The QBR is that essential activity that if you don't do it well, you're going to go out of business. And if you do it well, you'll flourish. And the fact is, Alex, for most small businesses, we don't really know what the QBR is. So we kind of touch on it, kind of don't. And that's why most businesses kind of step up a little bit and then step back down, step up and step down. We don't flourish because we don't know what the QBR is.
That's great. Thank you. So we have some questions from the community. So I want to get to those. The first one is, some would argue that your 4 weeks for 4-week vacation for each person does mean duplication, and that cost could make a business less competitive.
Yeah. So make a business less competitive. I don't know if that's true. So let me explain how we do this. So our social media expert is Jeremy. He's our in-house guy. He is leaving to go on his 4-week vacation. These are paid vacations. You don't have to do it that way, but we've decided to do it that way. What he has to do, though, to leave is he has to commit that all his work will go on unabated, that there'll be no disruption. And so he's trained, and we call them captures, but SOPs for every function he does. So Isabel and Jenna, I believe, are his 2 backups. And they're going to do the workload in his absence. What happens then is when he returns, he goes back into the flow, but there is a debriefing between him, these 2 individuals, and a manager saying what worked, what didn't work. And those are things he needs to fix next. When someone leaves for a 4-week vacation, it exposes the weaknesses in the transfer. Now, here's the thing. Jeremy could next month say, I'm done working here. I have a new opportunity. All that knowledge can go out the door. What we're doing by these annual 4-week vacations is we're assuring that the knowledge stays here and that we have people in an immediate backup role. Now, Isabel, she's going on her 4-week vacation. Actually, she's literally on hers right now. She just left. Her backup, and she's returning soon, but her backup is Kelsey and Amy, I think. And they have redundancy for her. So it's triggered this redundancy. It also forced our team members to elevate their game and avoid what's called territorialism, which is actually probably the biggest weak spot of businesses, where someone has all the knowledge of something, but they don't want to share with anyone else because their job depends on it. Part of their job is the transference of this knowledge. And therefore, for them to become significant and important to the company, they have to keep up-leveling their game. So I see the reverse happening in our own test, and we've done this with other companies too. It's actually often always the reverse, where people have to step up to prove their worth as opposed to protect and hide to show their best.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the biomimicry in the question before. We had Tamsin Woolley Barker on Conversations at the Edge last week, talking about this concept and talking about these organizational structures that really shouldn't be about hierarchies and protection, but about sharing and shared purpose and kind of working together in the beehive to make sure that the common purpose is achieved. So
I'll share just a quick story about that. You, Alex, and I, and all of us listening in, we get recruited to support a QBR, and we don't even know it. Classic example is with the terrorist prevention that's happening throughout the United States, but other countries too. And perhaps you've traveled and you've seen posters that say, "See something, say something." Do you know that message came around about in the 70s, but wasn't propagated? It really started around the 2000s, especially since 9/11, that these signs become more prominent. And as a result, they've decreased terrorist attacks, I think, by like 40%. They've unfoiled, or they've defoiled, is whatever the word is, terrorist attacks because someone's called and saw something and said something. So you can recruit your entire staff to support the most important mission, the QBR of your organization, just through education. My team here doesn't write books. I now have a co-writer, form of redundancy for myself, so it's not all dependent on me. But my other team knows that we got to be producing books, and if they see that I'm slowing down, or my co-writer and I are slowing down, then they have to help avail attention to that, so we get back on track.
Thank you. So you also have this concept of the 4 Ds for time management, running your business. And now I think you've added a 5th D in the new book. Can you talk a little bit about the Ds and why you added a 5th?
So there's four elements that must be functioning in business. And as an owner of a business, we have to elevate ourselves like a throttle to the highest end. I was having dinner. Michael Gerber and I spoke together. This is quite a few years ago, a decade ago, 10 years ago. We both keynoted together in Mexico, and we went out for dinner. And we were talking about his book, E-Myth, which is an industry-defining or category-defining book. Don't work in a business, work on a business. But one problem that presented itself is most entrepreneurs work in the business harder and harder until one day, hopefully, the business will switch to working on it. But it isn't a switch, it's a throttle. So Clockwork is homage to Gerber's work, in versus on, but it's the throttle or the steps to get there. The first D is doing work, right? That's what the technician does. The second level is deciding, and it's often a trap, but it's an important phase that we move through. This is where we tell other people what to do, task rabbiting. When they have a question, they come back to us saying, "What should I do now?" And we go, "Oh, you should do that." We make a decision for them. So deciding is the assignment of tasks, but the control of decision-making. We often say we're delegating, but we're not. We're not. We're task rabbiting, because the next level is delegation. Delegation is the assignment of outcomes. It's where if you were my boss, Alex, and you said, hey, invoicing is important. Let's have a conversation why it's important. And I say, well, I think it will we'll be able to bill on time and bill accurately. That'll support our company and be fair to our clients. Then you would tell me, great, get us there. We have a best practice, follow that. But if you see disruptions or challenges, navigate around it. And when I come back with a question, you would say, well, Mike, I hired you for that thing on your shoulders, that brain of yours. You make the decision. So delegation is the assignment and empowerment of someone over outcomes. The highest level is designing. Designing is where you have the vision for where you want to take your business and you organize the resources to get there. It's strategic work. It is the hardest work. It is the most caloric burn. And that's why many entrepreneurs, and I'm guilty of this, it's just easier just to do work because it's mindless and it's exhausting, but at least I can see results. Strategic thinking, it takes time, takes a lot of coordination, and it's a big caloric burn. The funny thing, or the ironic thing, is a CEO, a really good CEO, will be making 3 or 4 strategic decisions a year that transform a business. That's what the CEO is paid for. The 5th D came out of research out of England, identified that the average knowledge worker, this is kind of true for blue collar too, but the average knowledge worker is productive 3.2 hours a day, regardless of hours worked. So you can work 10 or 8 or 5, and the output is about 3.2 for everyone. So the conclusion was wow, we need downtime to recharge. In fact, our office here, one little secret of our 25 folks here, the majority are part-time employees. They're taking downtime on their own, whatever that may be. But when they come into work, we still give them 8 hours of work. They just got to pack it in those 3.2 hours. Now they actually have 4-hour work days or 5-hour work days. But the key is this, that we need recharging time. And we as a business can afford it to them. So we do for our full-time employees. We know you can't just be cranking 8 hours straight. So we give mechanisms to recharge. And then when you are going full throttle, you can be so much more productive as opposed to exhausted.
Thank you. So there's only a couple minutes left. And before we go, there's a single word that you share with entrepreneurs that changes kind of their role of owners and brings about a business that can run itself. So can you tell us about that word that you share?
Yeah, it's probably the most important word you can use. And it's very awkward. I challenge, if you want your business to run itself, I challenge you to use the word shareholder as the category of how you define yourself. There is no greater driver in humanity than the need to comply with our self-identity. So if I say I suck at math, I'll prove myself right by not doing any math or practicing or studying. We have to comply with it. The word entrepreneur, I love that word, but it's become bastardized. And there's a lot of pretty mainstream pundits who say entrepreneurship's hustle and grind. Entrepreneurship is work your tail off. And I disagree 100%. Entrepreneurship has always been about envisioning a future and taking the risk of organizing resources. And when I say resources, it's money, it's people, it's technology, it's vendors, it's clients to get to that vision. That's what an entrepreneur is. Now, the reason I like the word shareholder is I'm a shareholder in Ford. They sent a stock distribution check. I own 100 shares. They sent me a distribution check for $13 last quarter. I didn't run back to the factory and say, what do I need to do to earn my $13 here? I didn't return it to them. I took the money because I've taken on risk. The value may go up or may go down. Secondly, I render opinion. They vote for the board of directors. I vote for the board of directors. They have other strategic decisions. They reach out to shareholders. When we call ourselves a shareholder of our own business, we will behave the same way. Share in the profit for taking on extraordinary risk, starting a company, investing in a company, and give it strategic direction. Vote for the leadership team, or if you're too small for that at this point and you are the leadership, then take the strategic direction. You'll probably be involved in all of that. That's what a shareholder does. So it's very awkward. Next time you're at a cocktail party and someone says, what do you do? Stop saying I'm an entrepreneur, start saying I'm a shareholder of a small business. But if you repeat that enough, like I have, all of a sudden your mind starts shifting to what your real responsibility is. And the last thing is, gives you the freedom to reinsert yourself in the business. You're not going to run yourself out of a job here unless you want to. If you want to sit on the beach and drink Coronas, good for you. But for me, once my business was up and running itself, I said, what are the things I want to do? I love being a spokesperson, kind of like what we're doing now. I love doing public speaking, and I love writing books. So I've reinserted myself to do the things that give me joy. I have redundancy in all those places. We don't have time to explain it, but I do. case I'm not available. But by using the word shareholder, I remove myself first so I can reinsert myself in a joyful way.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, as always, it's been a real pleasure to have you join our community today. Thank you to the community for joining us, and hope you'll go out and get a copy of Mike's new book, Clockwork, the revised version.
There it is.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll actually be back on Wednesday for a second edition of Conversations at the Edge. So hope to see you again for our new guest on Wednesday.